All right, Diane Guzman wrapping up on the stand there. They're going to take a quick 10-minute break. She was the crime lab analyst, and she just went through a lot about the DNA analysis again. She looked at the grab bar, the soiled colored shirt, a T-shirt, and basically she said that there wasn't enough on there to analyze anything. She talked about how nothing came back matching in this case. So the defense here is leaning on this a lot because this is the DNA, right? So this is going to be a big part of their argument. Julie, do you think that this is effective, this type of testimony here, to help them out?
I do. You know, the average juror expects DNA, especially in a crime this brutal. And one assumes that either he went there to commit the crime, of which he would have potentially, I guess, worn gloves. But that doesn't seem to be likely. It seems more like a crime of passion than anything else. And so you expect DNA. And so if there's no DNA, a juror says, well, that's one more reason that we don't have enough to convict this guy.
Right. And one of the things that we know is that the DNA and, the cell records are a big part of this. So now that we've heard about this DNA from the defense, this is going to be important, and important that the jurors are listening to this, because this is something that they're trying to figure out. Hey, this DNA is a big reason that there could be doubt here, that this might not be Segura. Steve Mulroy is also with us. He's the University of Memphis law professor. Steve, good to have you on the show here.
Thank you.
Talk about this trial so far. You know, we've been looking at the defense's witnesses today, as of, most recently, obviously, this crime lab analyst. What do you think about her testimony? What is this showing here?
Well, as you just heard, the absence of the DNA matching evidence is something that's in the defense's favor. There's, something called the CSI effect, where jurors expect DNA in all these cases. Now, of course, you don't always have DNA or good possible samples at every crime scene. But since it is the prosecution's burden to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant committed the crime, the fact that there was this testing of DNA and there wasn't enough to say anything conclusive, there was no match, in fact, is going to sow doubt in the minds of the jurors. And if that is enough for a reasonable doubt, then, of course, that helps the defense.
All right, so we've been listening to Brian Anthony Leslie, and he's this police interrogation expert. He's basically being given his opinion on how this interview/interrogation went with Bahina Rivera. And he said that he believes they used the deductive method. He said that while the officers were questioning him, he suspects that they already knew he was a person of interest and then a suspect. He also had noted some of the questions that weren't asked, and that's what led him to his findings there. He says that because of how long Rivera was there and how vulnerable he was, that he wouldn't take what he said as credible, which was interesting because he led them to the body, as we know. But he also said that he believes he was susceptible to coercion and those type of techniques by the police officer. So that is what we just learned. Steve, I'll come out to you right now. Knowing this, do you find that this is going to help the defense out with this type of expert here?
It might. The issue here is that I don't think there's a dispute that there was a flaw in the giving of the Miranda warnings earlier in the morning part of the interrogation. And so some of the statements that were made in the early part of the interrogation would be excludable because he wasn't properly Mirandized. But the government has a strong argument that under the applicable law, physical evidence, tangible evidence that's the product of even an improper Miranda violative interrogation still comes in. So the body could come in, and that would be enough, I think, probably to convict. I think the relevance of the sleep deprivation, the prolonged interrogation, the limited English proficiency of the suspect, the fact that the police maybe were taking advantage of all those things, that's if the interrogation didn't just violate Miranda, but actually violated the voluntariness rule. If it was an involuntary, coercive interrogation, then everything that follows from it, any statements, even after they properly Mirandize them, even the body, any physical evidence, that's all excludable. So I think that's, to the extent that they can convince the fact finder that this was not only a Miranda violative interrogation, but an involuntary or coercive one, then that would help the defendant in making the argument for suppression.
All right, Steve, thank you. And Julie, do you agree with that? I mean, one of the things that we said earlier was that the fact that, you know, the Miranda is obviously a big part of this, but now that we have this separate part with this investigation and how they did this process, do you think the process of the questioning will play effect in here too?
Yeah, and keep in mind, even if at the end of the day, the judge allows this in and allows this trial to go forward, they have to now go in front of a jury. And the jury also has to buy that the detectives didn't use these tactics to go after someone who wouldn't necessarily have given this information but for all this manipulation. And so, yes, I think it's a huge factor here. And if it goes to trial, it'll be a huge factor there as well.
All right, Julie, Steve, thank you so much. We're going to take a quick break right now on Law and Crime. When we come back, we'll be back live in Henry Segura's trial. Stay with us.